Live from the JLE in London, you're listening to History for the Curious, the podcast. 20 minutes with Rabbi Aubrey Hersh, hosted by myself, Menat Reisner. Join us as we cross continents, sail through the centuries, tracing lives, uncovering events, and following epic journeys to reveal the untold stories and the mysteries that have impacted our history and shaped us into who we are today. And welcome back, Rabbi Hersh, and thank you for that magnificent photo you sent from Spain yesterday. How was your trip?
It was very nice, just back off the plane a few hours ago.
And hence the slightly late recording this week. Hope our listeners will understand. We are doing a one-off special this week. This is based on current affairs. Wherever you look, newspapers, the media, you can't get away with the fact that there's a bit of turmoil going on in the royal family, and it's for you to tell us if this is the first time in history that the royal family had a dispute.
Right. So as an introduction, since we are dealing with relationships this week, I wanted to mention that friends of mine, Rabbi Simi and Robertson Rivka Lerner, have a podcast called Nuanced Judaism, and at the moment they are dealing with the subtle toxicity of codependence. Two takes on it, and therefore I think it is part of a relationships idea. Either way, we are familiar with royal disputes in the media, as you mentioned, but they don't necessarily have specific interest to the Jews. However, monarchs, since the beginning of time, have been involved in confrontation. Land, power. It's the legacy of Esav, of Edom, al-Char b'chotichya, to live by the sword. And it's actually a matter of pride. King X, the brave, essentially translates as how many people did he kill in war? Now, unsurprisingly, this would spill over to the family itself. The Romans excelled in wiping out their own families to forestall any threat to their power. And when we learn history until the early modern period, it's all about war, even in literature. Where would Shakespeare be if he didn't have war? Richard III, Henry V, the War of the Roses.
As you said, it's nothing to do with Jews. Were there even any Jews in that time?
In England? No, nor in France, I guess. But we are going to look at two kings in particular, and the Jewish view of those rulers will differ greatly from the history in school textbooks. But perhaps we will start with a book, anyway, or the book, an extract which our own Rabbi Shua Bitton suggested. When Harry dressed up as Hitler in Nazi uniform, and all the world's press reported it, his father, the now King Charles, sent him to meet with Chief Rabbi Sachs. As he writes, "He offered me a cup of tea, then dived straight in. He wasn't unkind, but it had to be done. There was no way around it. He placed my stupidity in historical context. He spoke about the 6 million, the annihilated, the Jews. He urged me not to be devastated by my mistake, but instead to be motivated. He spoke to me with the quality one often encounters in truly wise people. Forgiveness. He assured me that people do stupid things, say stupid things, but it doesn't need to be their intrinsic nature."
Now that Rabbi Sachs has passed on, I'm assuming if this ever happens again, they'll be coming to you.
Not sure that I would want to deal with it. And I'm not sure how close to his heart he took this advice, but let's move back some 550 years to the famous Don Yitzhak Abarbanel, or Abravanel.
And the King of Spain.
So, we naturally associate him with Spain, both in terms of power and tragedy, but he had a life beforehand in Portugal, more powerful and more tragic. And just like Spain had a Jewish golden era, Portugal even more so. Not only were the Jews involved in finance, but even in the writing of law. And in particular, the years 1449 to 1481 were extraordinary for the Jews of Portugal. They lived where they wished. They established communities, and their skills made them wealthy and Portugal prosperous. Portugal had over 100,000 Jews in a general population of 1 million. And, when a rioting mob attacked the 3 Jewish communities of Lisbon in 1449, King Alfonso V, who was in Evora, which was 70 miles away, immediately left for Lisbon. He gave orders to stop the rioting. He inflicted severe punishment against offenders. And this king relied heavily on the advice of the Duke of Braganza, who from 1471 to 1481 consulted almost almost exclusively with the Abarbanel and promoted him strongly to the king, who himself was an intellectual, a collector of books, a man of learning.
How old was the Abarbanel at that time?
So he is born in Lisbon in 1437, so he's in his late 30s, and he is learned, he is wealthy, he is respected. In fact, we can get an idea of how wealthy by the extent of his loans to the crown. In 1480, there were a group of Christians and Jews who lent the crown 12 million reals. Now, I don't know how much that is worth, but the fact that it's got the word million in it gives you an idea. It was not a small amount. The Abarbanel's share was more than 10%. But in August 1481, the king died unexpectedly at 49, a victim of the plague. And the king's successor was his son, John II, who was an extreme monarchist. He wanted total power and cut out his nobility, such as the Braganzas. And whereas his father, Alfonso V, had ruled through alliances and given large areas of land to nobility, John II reversed that dramatically. And obviously this new set of policies brought the king into outright conflict with two of his most powerful nobles, the Duke of Braganza and the Duke of Viseu, who both attempted to halt or slow the king's new initiatives. Now, it's important to realize that the Duke of Viseu was the king's brother-in-law, and the Duke of Braganza was his wife's brother-in-law. And they were also both the king's first cousins, so this is very close to home.
And this story isn't about bridesmaids' dresses or alleged tears.
No, this is about real power, real politics, and gets very messy. The uneasy peace is shattered when the king accused the Duke of Braganza of treason. He had him arrested on the 29th of May 1483, and he was sentenced to death, and a month later he was beheaded. And this scenario basically repeats itself a while later with the other duke, the king's own brother-in-law, whom the king stabbed to death himself. It's what you call real family conflict. You know, they didn't just write books about one another or make heavily remunerated Netflix appearances. And even though the Abarbanel was not active in the conspiracy, he would now be engulfed by it.
Well, just because he was a Jew?
Actually, almost not at all, because he was a confidant and advisor to these other members of the royal family and an advisor to the former king. His fate was sealed by association.